Hello everyone and welcome back to Global Marketing Day. For those of you just joining us, my name is Ross Tavendale. I'm the Managing Director of Type A Media.
And I'm Fernando Angulo, Head of Communications at Semrush.
So we're your hosts for the London leg of Global Marketing Day. And we're going to be leading all of the discussions now on brand management, marketing, social media, and also SEO.
And if you have any questions, please just use the hashtag Global Marketing Day on Twitter.
Exactly. Next up, we've got a very, very special guest, Mr. Rick Rodriguez. Rick is the SEO consultant at Yext. Yext are a New York Stock Exchange listed technology company.
Indeed.
And you say you believe there's a paradigm shift happening in search with consumers turning to answer engines, not search engines, for direct information, and brands need to surface more accurate information online, however and wherever the customer is looking.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
Fantastic. So Rick, today your topic is going to be talking about how information will change the search landscape.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm strapped in and I'm ready to go. I absolutely can't wait. So over to you.
Fantastic. Hello everyone, it's great to be here live from London at Global Marketing Day. I'm hoping if I press the buttons, things will work. Who knows? My name is Rick Rodriguez. I'm SEO consultant at Yext. And Yext is, as Ross mentioned, a technology company that helps brands deliver perfect answers everywhere, however consumers are looking, wherever they're found. There's a growing trend, as we mentioned, that there's this paradigm shift going on in the world of search. To quote Star Wars, we've all felt it. It's there. And in fact, we've all seen, information and data like this that talks about how no-click searches are increasing, organic searches are reducing, perhaps paid is increasing as well. And invariably what this means is that there is one fundamental takeaway for marketers, and that is that the customer's journey now starts at the question, and because everything starts at the question, consumers expect answers. Now, we've got to this point because consumers have been retrained or are starting to be retrained on how they can look. So if you think about search engines back in sort of the late 90s, their role was very much a discovery-based engine. There was only 17 odd million websites, and consumers didn't know really what the web could offer. And so search engines' job was to connect consumers with that information to help answer their needs. As more websites came into being and more consumers became aware of what they could get from search and from the web, search engines changed. They became all around prioritization. And this is where Google excelled, because Google's PageRank algorithm was fantastic at helping consumers get connected to reliable and trustworthy information. Now, as we get to sort of the end of the noughties, the tens, is that what we call this decade that we're in? There are now 1.6 billion websites out there, and consumers, interestingly, have more ways to look for information, whether that's on search directly, whether that's through a desktop or a mobile, but through voice devices, through AR, through VR, and other different ways of interacting. And they are giving different types of information. So it's not just lists of blue links, it's answers as well. So really, these search engines, these systems are becoming answer engines. The thing is, as an SEO community, our way of working, the things that we look at, our framework, if we put it like that, has largely remained more or less the same. We look at intent-driven queries, we look at the questions and the information and things that people are looking for, and then we look at activity based around more or less three different things. Accessibility, which is your technical factors, relevance, which is your content factors, and authority, which are your backlink link-based factors, with the view of providing relevant and useful results back to users. The thing is, in the age of information, in the age of people looking for information, answers, and asking more complex questions, this is somewhat a one-dimensional strategy. And the reason I believe this is because actually this focuses entirely on one thing, impacting rankings. And when you think about rankings, one, they are complex in and of themselves. And two, actually, there is so much to search that is going on that just to focus on rankings, which is the component that we know the least about, and trying to influence how your site appears in which order, is missing the whole point around actually making sure your site appears in the first place. So ranking has a few quirks, and I guess what I want to do today is just take everyone through a few ideas of how ranking might work, and then what might happen before that. Because there's lots and lots of buzzwords and ideas that we talk about as SEOs that I think we use a lot, but we don't really fundamentally understand. And when you start to understand, you start to get into the detail behind all this information. It's like going from a world in black and white to a world in 4K definition, and you start to really know what's going on. And the great thing about it is this information's all out there. It's not like ranking, which is this hidden black box of information. If you want to know how entity-based search works, there are entire scientific studies and research papers out there that you can go and look and find out. Google recently launched this BERT system, and it's going to be, and it is revolutionary in search, but you don't have to guess at what BERT does. There's information out there. There is scientific information. There are studies. There is the full document behind how it works. You can go out and find out. So look, I'm going to reference Jason Barnard's theory in how ranking works, because I personally feel it's the most accurate or most reliable. And what Jason asserts is that ranking is ultimately a set of a website is determined, or the ranking of websites is determined based on all the different factors that are then given a score, and that aggregate score is then, for want of a better phrase, if we use a PPC terminology, the bid that then gets put into where that search might appear. So in this case, website 1 has various different factors that give it a score of 648. When you then look at that in the context of other websites, and you score the other websites, you finally get the rankings, and in this case, website 2 with the highest score of 869 is the one that appears first. The problem with that, and this is, by the way, where as SEOs we would focus, this is where our backlink factors come in, our content relevancy, our keyword optimization, perhaps this is where we focus. The problem with that is we know that there are secondary systems that impact the results and refine those results, that after the ranking order is put together, things like personalization get added, anti-bias systems get added. And so what ends up in position 1 from a ranking perspective might not actually be what the user sees. So invariably focusing on ranking is, let's say, it's a little bit one-dimensional. And that's, without considering things like different types of results. And Jason asserts in his theory that actually websites can be scored in its kind of bid criteria methodology, but actually different components that appear in search results can do as well. Images are scored, and snippets are scored, and news results are scored. The difference is, because certain types of results can have more than one result show, an image can show up to 4 potential results. And those images, what ends up in image place number 4, which might be in position 2 in the ranking SERP, in the SERP, might actually not be a high enough quality or might not be a high enough score to even get into the SERP in the first place if it was standing on its own. So ranking as a system is fascinating, it's incredibly important, but as SEOs we focus a lot on that, and actually perhaps we should be looking elsewhere. And importantly, this tells us how an input is assessed, but fundamentally not what the input and therefore the output is going to be. So there's this gets compounded by the fact that search is now more than your website. Now, again, we focus on rankings. Rankings are great in search results, but if you ask an Alexa device, or you ask a Google Home device to give you an answer to a question, you get a single answer back. You get this is the answer. You don't get a list of 10 blue links that you can impact and try and optimize for. And so you have to prove that you're credible in some way. And this is seen across, and this is something that's seen across search results, across direct answers, and lots of other platforms. The thing is, there's one fundamental commonality between all of these things. They each leverage a source of information, a knowledge graph, and they use some sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning, to work out what gets returned back to users. And what's really interesting is, and there's some fantastic thinking going on in our community from the likes of Dawn Anderson and from people like Bill Slawski around this. We don't look we look so much at the ranking and how to optimize on this side. We actually don't look at how we structure our site and how we provide the best possible information back to search engines to satisfy their need for knowledge. But actually, it's that need for knowledge that is what gets returned to users and then ordered. So what I want to do now is just go through a few concepts that happen and sort of start getting one step further back and back in the process from rankings. So firstly, we all talk about the ranking algorithm. We talk about algorithms and impacting algorithms, and algorithms are updating and change. So look, an algorithm is just a set of specific instructions that facilitates action. And actually, we talk about algorithms changing. it may or may not be the algorithm that's changing. It might just be that the model that the algorithm instructs is learning, and as a result, the output is getting better. Actually, really what we need to be thinking about is the network itself. And networks are something that I'm fascinated by. I read Jeff Steibel, I think the gentleman's name is, book on breakpoints and how networks are fundamentally part of everything, from reindeer eating lichen on islands dying out to lots and lots of other things, right? But actually, the web is a network. The web is just a connected set of documents and information that is connected through internal and external links. So if you can understand how networks work as a concept, you can start to understand how search works. So let's look at how network works. And we've all got a network. We've all got access to possibly one of the most complex networks out there, which is your brain. Your brain is just a connection, a set of neurons, which are your documents, your stores of information, if you will, in the web, and synapses, the connections, or the internal, external links, if you will, between them. And when your body wants to do something, the parts of your brain, the cells that are related to doing that, they fire. They go from being negatively charged to positive charged. They become activated, as we would call it. And they pass that charge onto the next cell. Now, some cells may or may not want to light up because perhaps they do a different thing in your brain. Perhaps they're not there for for whatever action your body's trying to achieve. But the ones that need to light up might. When these cells pass this information to other cells, some cells may only light up when they have a certain amount of positive energy passed to them. And that's what triggers them. But ultimately, when you have a critical mass of cells that are lighting up, that do different things, that's when your body does something. And we can use this kind of methodology, this understanding, this way of thinking we can take it and apply it to search and to lots of different things. Because we can use network to do crazy things like predicting intent and serving relevant results to users. So this is a thought exercise. This is not specifically how Google says we should do it, or Google says they do this. And in fact, Google systems are very, very complicated. But in terms of learning, I'm going to use several different techniques and tactics here that we all know about in SEO, so hopefully try and dispel a few ideas and talk about what they mean. We think Google clearly is using way more complex techniques, but it works as a way to learn the fundamentals. So let's assume that this is a query that Google has never seen before, but knows, based on the information it has, is similar to another query. And so in this case, someone might type the query in, and Google knows that it needs to, based on the other information it has, that it can return a local map pack, perhaps some e-commerce pages, and article content. Importantly, not specifically this result in the local pack, but just whether it should return one at all. And perhaps then when it gets some user data, perhaps it does this, it can start to learn about whether these different types of results are valid or not, or worthwhile. Now, it knows, based on its understanding of how pages perform for similar concepts or similar topics, what sort of for want of a better phrase, the threshold or the norm should be for these metrics. And in this case, we can see that result type 1 and 2 conform to that, and result type 3 doesn't. Or, to put it another way, the network that is existing around this is acting one way. These two are acting similarly to the other networks it has, and as a result, it's returning back. It can see the trends and patterns, and so as a result, it returns back the local map pack and more e-commerce pages, and it iterates and iterates and iterates until it's highly confident. Now, we know it does this through loads and loads of different. This is ultimately the basics of machine learning, and I could sit here and talk about that in more detail, but I realise we only have a certain amount of time today. So let's leave intent there and move on to information, because that's what this is all about. And actually, the information that provides intent comes from the web as a whole. Now, I'm going to use a really well-known phrase here that everyone talks about in SEO. Actually, before I go on to this, I want to sort of preface this by saying Google does not use this. Google uses complex methods to understand this. But we're all aware of the phrase TFIDF, right? And I do wonder how many people really understand or know what it means. Now, this is where I'm going to shoot myself in the foot and give a description of what it means, and people that know exactly what it means are going to tell me I'm wrong. So I'm going to dumb down and simplify it so everyone can understand, because this world of information retrieval is quite complex. So TF-IDF is term frequency inverse document frequency. Term frequency is the number of times a particular word appears in a body of text or a corpus. Inverse document frequency then is the importance of that word to the overall document, or how often does that word appear in, or the frequency of a word appearing in a specific piece of text which you know is about something, against a whole body of text which could be about lots of different things. So to put this into context, we have here's two bits of text. One, it's about a bank, right? And you can see it's about a bank because it talks about banks a lot. One side talks about bank in the concept of water and rivers, and one talks about it in the terms of a financial institution. So firstly, both sides have the words the, to, of, a. And this is one of the reasons why this is not a good, wouldn't make sense for search engines to use TFIDF as its core way to understand what words are being said, because the words the, to, and for, as we've seen with BERT, are really, really important to understanding context and meaning. So this is really for educational purposes to understand what this means, as opposed to anything used in search. But it can remove these words and start to look at what words are frequently mentioned across different bodies of text, but not mentioned across the sort of the two texts that we've got here. So land, body, water, structures, geography, limnology, that's clearly one thing. And financial institution, deposits, credit, lending, etc., that's another thing. By removing the words then that it knows are unimportant, grouping things together in concepts, it can derive that one piece of content is then about a river and a stream in relation to the word bank, and then another in terms of a financial institution. And search engines, they are all about this knowledge. They are all about learning things. So however they do it, their goal is to match a consumer, match a user with their answer, but not just from having the right information or right page, but really knowing what that person is looking for and returning that. The problem is, language is complicated, right? Language is really complicated. Take a horse, for example, and this is actually from a Google patent. I'm using this, so I'm pretty sure it's a Google patent anyway. It's from a patent. What is a horse, right? A horse is, well, we know a horse is an animal, right? And horses relate to jockeys, except a horse is actually a thing that a carpenter uses. I have no idea what they use that's a horse, but apparently they do. And it's something that a gymnast will vault over. So it could be one of three different things that when someone searches what is a horse is what they're looking for. And actually what we're trying to establish here is which of the domains of horse in the vector of horse are we talking about, if we're going to use some technical terminology. Well, perhaps it can learn this from someone's search history. Now, could do this from lots of different ways. But let's say someone started off by looking for sports and then looked for gymnastics. It's very clear that the person is looking for horse in the context of gymnasts. But as a machine, it doesn't know know that there's a difference without knowing the context behind ideas. And this is where the idea of entity-based understanding comes from. This is why, it's so important, because all the knowledge graph is a list, a database of connected themes and ideas and topics and how they're connected. It's a graph. I mean, if you imagine a graph with an x and a y axis, it's how much does this topic relate to this in the context of this across all of the different topics. And it derives this meaning and the connections from it from the web. I mean, this is a website. It's an example website that talks about various different topics, riding, jockeys, etc. There is a match between this and the entities that Google understands. And to highlight it with fancy colours, I just wanted to put colours in here. Everyone loves colours. You can see how it starts to learn this. Importantly, for how we think about this from marketers and how we can potentially use this, it really comes down to information architecture. The deeper down you go in your site, the more likely you are to be getting down to information on a specific entity. But if you can prove to search engines that you're a subject matter expert by having lots of information around related topics or just the topic as a whole, if your site is about riding and you talk about the various different components within riding, you can convince search engines that you are an expert. But if you're only talking about specific horses, well, search engines know there's lots of related content and lots of context and information around that, but you might not be the right person to serve for it. So this is something that we should be thinking about. So from knowing the what, we can apply the how and consider what this means. So what is horse might return lots and lots of different pages. And actually these pages then relate to entities and links and connections between topics, which are all very varied and could return lots of different websites and lots of different pages. We know that there is a narrowing down that happens, and that narrowing down might mean that certain pages, certain types of information gets pulled back and served to users. And we saw we saw this in the intent modeling that we did slightly earlier. And we know that then they're refining that intent and serving the information back to the correct kind of formats back. Importantly, this is 4 steps, and this could be hundreds of steps going on here. We haven't got to this point, which is ranking. So as search marketers, we focus on this final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but we don't think about what goes into it. And what goes into it is information. And as a result, the idea of maybe keyword optimization is a little bit unhelpful, right? So look, takeaway. I didn't want to talk at people for a length of time and not give a takeaway. And I actually think the takeaway is that there is a new way to think about search. And I don't want to throw the baby out the bathwater, so to speak. I'm going to show you how you link it back to what you're already doing. But it is still intent-driven queries. It's still questions. People are still asking and looking for things. But it's a way of thinking about it in terms of your platform, your presence, and having that underpinned by the information, how you're perceived online, in order to drive, to provide intent-driven answers. Importantly, answers, not just results. And as I say, this framework, this way of thinking, aligns to the past pillars of search, because actually platform experience, we know all these factors are important to search engines, but actually that links very closely to the information on the page and to things like structured data. A technical SEO is covering so many different bases, from site speed to structuring information. Actually, platform and information is accessibility. It is technical SEO. Likewise, relevance, the content you put out there, has an experiential factor. People want to find information. If they find the correct information on your site quickly, they have a good positive experience. But it's also the content you put out there about your business, about your brand, and that search engines can find. Content marketing is platform, or your relevancy factors are your platform and your presence. And finally, your authority, your backlinks, and the information you're pushing back to, and the signals you're sending to your site, that is your presence again. But it's also information, because search engines can derive information from the sites that are pointing to you and learn from it as well. So, to sum up, information powers the knowledge in search. When we talk about the knowledge graph, it's the information that's out there that powers it. And this is now fundamentally the basis for search. I hope you guys found that interesting. I had a great time.
Wow, I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. The bit you were talking about where you were comparing it to like the brain structures and things like that, like my brain literally just went like that. That was fantastic. I've got, the first thing that jumps out to me when you were speaking about all that stuff, I've got a weird name, Ross Tavendale.
Yes.
I'd love to say it's some clan or something like that, but I think we're just mutts from Scotland. But I don't own my SERP, I'm not in the knowledge graph. Help. How do I go even begin to think about that?
So the first thing you could do is make sure that there's information around you. Okay? So I had this exact question because I set myself the challenge of, well, there's a famous footballer called Ricardo Rodriguez, and my name is Ricardo Rodriguez. Right? That's the
nightmare.
I know. And so when you're searching for that, not that I'm that vain, that, well, maybe I am, I don't know. But
every day, every morning.
Every day, right? Who doesn't Google their own names when you're in SEO? For a long time that came up. And the way that I started to, so firstly, the question is, can you establish yourself as an entity in terms of when someone searches for you, can you be returned? So if someone searches for Rick Rodriguez or Ricardo Rodriguez, can I get into that SERP in the first place? Forget the fact that we're looking for knowledge graph, knowledge cards and all that kind of thing. It's actually, can I get in search in the first place? And the way I did that was by being out there, by increasing my footprint, my presence, by doing roundup posts for the likes of Semrush and other people and webinars, and just trying to have an online presence. That gave me lots and lots of different points of reference that search engines could then reference, ultimately. Then, the problem I had was that everything pointed back to my LinkedIn, which is great because, I love people to visit my LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect, I'm always available. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But actually, it was only when I started getting my own website and started linking everything that's out there back to my own presence and to an entity, an entity is like an asset that I control, that I could start to shape what was out there. So, because it tied it all together, it anchored it in a single point. So now whatever I put on my website's only one page. It's been saying coming soon for about the last 6 months or so. But now when I search for my name, my website ranks. And okay, you could say, oh, it's a name domain, etc. No, I'm trying to create an online presence that points information back to me. So the next step for me is to test out, well, what if I start adding structured data to that? What if I start saying, look, I am Rick Rodriguez, an SEO consultant, and I have these properties, that I am a human, and that as a human, I have a profession, and as a profession, my profession is in the world of SEO. That's something you can do using schema markup, for example, and I really do believe that structured data is something that we as marketers have overlooked, but it has always been important, right? All the way back to when it was launched, it's always been this underlying bit of information that search engines always, because there's so much information out there. You think about it this way: if a search engine goes to a page, it's got to pull all the information on the page and make sense of it, and that's fine, but that takes processing power. That takes resources to do. Whereas if you can, as a site, provide very, very obvious basic information back to search engines, and there's no, it removes any ambiguity. And one thing we've seen with BERT is that there is a concerted effort to remove ambiguity. You can't optimize for BERT, but one thing that I would take away as part of the launch very much is that just if your site doesn't clearly state what you do, it really now needs to. It's not going to help you rank better. It's just there is clearly a push for removing ambiguity, the disambiguation. I can never say that word. But structured data has always been a way to help that and help. So you don't rank for your name, or you don't rank with a knowledge card for your name.
I mean, of course I rank.
You always rank for your name. You are the Ross, right? But I would start with creating an online footprint. Start providing positive signals. Anchor that in something. And then make sure that once you've established that as the anchor, then you structure the information on it so that it's really easy for search engines to interpret.
Fantastic. So when it comes to, if we had to have like a major takeaway for the guys at home to actually start getting into that world, you mentioned a lot of things. You said structured data, you said BERT. Is there some resources we should be looking at, or some maybe places to kind of kick us off? Like, where did you learn all this stuff?
So firstly, Twitter, the SEO community on Twitter is phenomenal. We genuinely believe we are a really collaborative and helpful community. So there are some fantastic people to start following. I mentioned before Dawn Anderson. She's putting out some incredible pieces. She knew about BERT. She saw it coming way before, and I definitely recommend following her. She's fantastic. But actually, for me, I just started with what is machine learning. I literally put it into YouTube.
A Google search. Fantastic.
I started with a Google search. I think there's a site called 3 Brown 1 Blue. There's a channel that has a whole 5 video series on what machine learning is. It's quite accessible. It's not super techy, but it does go into the maths behind it.
Fantastic.
That's a great place.
That's a fantastic guy. Actually, we're going to have you in a few sessions more.
Yes.
So Rick's going to be here with us. Thank you very much for such an amazing presentation. People in the chat were saying, oh my God, we need to have this information. All the evolution of the search engines, all the information. It is just great. So if you have any questions, if you have some thoughts, just please the hashtag Global Marketing Day. And we are everywhere. We are on YouTube, Twitter, just everywhere. Use the hashtag and we're going to get in touch with our next speaker.